A few months ago I made a video about one of the most interesting disappearances in music history, the vanishing of Richie Edwards, the main lyricist for the band Manic Street Preachers. Now this disappearance is sad but fascinating. It is filled with indiscrepancies and hints that he may have actually staged this disappearance to flee to a new life. After I made this video, I got a couple of comments asking me to cover somebody else in the music world who had vanished into thin air, but this person's case was wildly different because we actually know what happened. In fact, they straight up told us everything. Looking into it, I don't think it merits a full main channel video, and it doesn't really fit in with the theme of morbid musicians anyways, but I certainly think it deserves some kind of coverage. So today we're going to be talking about the fascinating life and disappearance of Connie Converse. Connie Converse was born on the 3rd of August 1924 in Laconia, New Hampshire, and grew up in the nearby town of Concord. She was the middle child of a strict religious family, but she was still an expressive child with a strong set of beliefs and morals from an early age. She was also considered very sharp. She was the valedictorian at her high school, achieving the highest possible grades in every subject, and after studying for 2 years in college, she moved to New York City where she started to craft a slightly new life. After so many years of being raised by strict parents and following the rules, she began to stray away from that a little bit, drinking, smoking, and hanging out with people who were a bit more open-minded. This was something that was strongly disavowed by her parents, and at this stage, she was also singing, songwriting, and trying to perform on a more consistent basis. Her parents also disagreed with her musical endeavors, possibly tying it into her newfound rebellion. Connie didn't have much success in New York, but she did write and record quite a few songs. An artist known as Gene Deitch met Connie and was very impressed with her musical ability. He arranged for her to go on the morning show on CBS with Walter Cronkite in 1954, which was her only ever TV appearance. Unfortunately, it looks like this performance might have been taped over because I can't find a single trace of it anywhere except for this one image that somebody posted onto Facebook. Apart from this, Connie essentially only recorded straight onto tape in her apartment or in her friends' kitchens or living rooms. However, her style actually fit this. Connie Converse was hugely ahead of her time, a DIY solo musician that was essentially making a form of bedroom folk 50 years before people even called it that.
See that bird sitting on my windowsill, well he's saying whippoorwill all the night through. See that brook running by my kitchen door, well it couldn't talk no more if it was you.
Her songwriting was beautiful and she had a very unique voice. She also had a very unique personality. She kept her private life incredibly private and gave very short answers when asked about it. According to her friends and family, she never hinted at being interested in anybody romantically, and it's very probable that she was never in any kind of a relationship. This kind of bluntness and ambiguity probably wasn't helpful for a young musician trying to navigate New York City. But again, I think this would be celebrated today, and Connie would be liked for having a personality that goes against the grain. But in the 1950s, this wasn't the case, and Connie struggled to make any kind of progress with her musical endeavors. So much so that she actually moved to Ann Arbor in 1961, where her brother, Philip Converse, was a professor at the University of Michigan. Apparently, her time there was initially quite fulfilling and enriching. She made friends, got a job as a secretary, and started writing for the Journal of Conflict Resolution, which she also had become the managing editor for. At this stage, she had essentially stopped writing songs, and unfortunately, we would not get any more music. By 1973, Connie's life had changed drastically. The Journal of Conflict Resolution had been auctioned off without her knowing, and it was moving to Connecticut, meaning that her writing endeavors were involuntarily coming to an end. She was burnt out at her job, and she was less personable and more closed off than ever before. She was also about to turn 50 and needed to get a hysterectomy, something that depressed her even further. By all accounts, she needed a change in her life, and this was something she most certainly pursued. In August of 1974, a few days after her 50th birthday, she wrote a series of letters to her loved ones. In each of these letters, she expressed how unhappy she was and said that she needed to leave home for an indefinite amount of time. We know now that she meant forever, because after these letters were found, Connie was never seen again. She got into her Volkswagen Beetle and drove away. We don't know what direction she went, where she ultimately ended up living, and what she did after this. She was never seen again and made no contact to anybody that she knew. In one of her letters, she wrote the following: "Let me go. Let me be if I can. Let me not be if I can't. Human society fascinates me and awes me and fills me with grief and joy. I just can't find my place to plug into it. In a documentary about Connie entitled We Lived Alone, directed by Andrea Cans, they speak to a number of Connie's friends and family, including her brother Philip, who actually reads out the letter that Connie gave to him.
In the months after I got back from my desperate flight to England, I began to realize that my new personal incapabilities were still stubbornly hanging in. I did fight, but they hung in. Maybe my time in England, financed largely by my friends, was too benign a treatment. At any rate, it's the only sustained period in my life that I now look back on as
in the
silliest detail as fun. Not getting anything done, I did sit in my bedsitter very often, bemused despair, but also had fun.
I don't know.
So that's her description of
her.
Yeah. Since then, I've watched the elegant, energetic people of Ann Arbor, those I know and those I don't, going about their daily business on the streets and in the buildings, and I've felt a detached admiration for their energy and elegance. If I ever was a member of this species, perhaps it was a social accident that has now been canceled.
There were a number of leads regarding Connie's whereabouts after she vanished in 1974, but they weren't followed through. Her family did actually hire a private investigator 10 years later to try and help find her, but the investigator informed them that there was nothing they could really do if they found her. After all, she was an adult who made her own decision and there wasn't any foul play at hand. This was her choice, and even if she was found, she had a right to her privacy. After this, her family respected her choice and left it alone, which must have been an incredibly difficult thing to do, but it was the right decision to make. Connie has been missing for almost 50 years, and in all that time, the Volkswagen Beetle she drove off in has never been found, which has always been a head-scratcher in this case. Her brother Philip believes that she may have driven it into a body of water and that this was the reason she left in the first place. He believes that these letters and this idea of her leaving to find a new life may have been a front to comfort her family, when in reality her true intentions were much darker. But this is merely speculation, and it is possible that she did find some kind of a new life. She always talked about living off the grid, and she actually gave Philip a check and asked him to pay for her health insurance for a specific period of time. This may tell us that she might have had some plans to leave, get the surgery and healthcare that she needed, and then go off the grid, but of course that's only an idea. Connie would be 98 years old today if she was still alive. That is, of course, almost definitely not the case, as we probably would have heard something about her whereabouts, but it is in the realm of possibility that she was around in the last 20 years, strumming a guitar somewhere, writing songs we'll never hear in a log cabin in the woods, or even living a totally different life in a completely different country. It's a nice thought, even if it's a bit overly optimistic. What we do know is that her music eventually found some well-deserved success. In 2004, her cassettes were played on a radio station that caught the ears of two men, Dan DeZula and David Herman. Together they tracked down some of Connie's work and compiled it into an album titled How Sad, How Lovely. This album sparked a lot of discourse around Connie. She finally got some radio play, and the documentary I mentioned earlier was made 5 years after this. Like I said, she was well ahead of her time in terms of songwriting and vocal performance, and her music aged very well. I highly recommend checking out some of her music. I think it's a pity she wasn't born a bit later, because I can easily see her music and personality finding significantly more success today than it did 60 years ago. We don't know where she went, we don't know what she did, and we don't really have any answers in regards to her going off the grid at all. But what we do have is her music, and I suppose that's enough.
I don't stand in the need of company with everything I see, talking like you. See that bird sitting on my windowsill, well, he's saying whippoorwill all the night through, just whippoorwill all the night through.